My father has always understood that people of all faiths, all backgrounds, and all communities deserve to be celebrated and supported.
The announcement was made in a low voice, almost too low for its significance. In a matter of minutes, the same headline appeared on all UK television networks. Devastating news on King Charles's health is confirmed by Prince William. The remark spread throughout living rooms, social media, and even the corridors of Buckingham Palace. Rumors concerning the king's treatment. His weakened appearance and his sudden absences had been circulating for months. This time, however, neither doctors nor royal aides provided the confirmation. It came straight from his son, the future king, who spoke with a sadness that no royal declaration could erase. There was an atmosphere outside the royal gates that had not been seen since the death of Queen Elizabeth. People gathered holding phones and flowers, not knowing if they should pray or brace themselves for what was coming. For hours, the castle itself was enveloped in quiet. The mall was lined with reporters. The windows were still securely closed, and cameras were aimed at them. International media repeatedly aired Williams's succinct statement across the Atlantic. Although my father's sickness is incurable, his condition is stable. We are making the most of our time together. The world only needed to hear those words, curable and precious. Since King Charles was diagnosed with cancer in early 2024, there's been conjecture regarding his health. The carefully phrased communications from Buckingham Palace had emphasized resilience, optimism, and rest. However, sources whispered behind closed doors that the toll from the therapies had been worse than anyone had anticipated. The monarch waved and grinned in public, his posture proud but his enthusiasm diminishing. He kept signing paperwork and meeting ambassadors, but he seemed to get more exhausted with each visit. Prince William has now come forward to speak the truth after months of doubt. One must go back decades to a period when Charles was the active, athletic heir to the throne in order to comprehend how this event came to be. He was well known in his childhood for his passion for hiking the Scottish Highlands, gardening, and polo. As evidence that a royal life could be active and meaningful, his physical health was an integral part of who he was. He would get up early, ride for hours, and never gripe about the rain or the bruises. When it came to his health, those who knew him at the time characterized him as tough, almost stubborn. A man who, despite his pain, refuses to be weak. When Charles had knee surgery in 1998, due to chronic pain that made attending public events difficult, that pride started to show signs of weakness. Although it was a modest arthroscopic operation that is typical of sportsmen, it was the first time his vulnerability was seen by the public. Prince's age was further brought home in 2003 when he underwent surgery to repair a hernia. On both occasions, he made light of the situation, shook hands with nurses, and joked with cameras outside the hospital before swiftly going back to work. In private, however, many close to him claimed that he started to reconsider his physical condition and what it meant to persevere. Other minor scares included a benign tumor that was removed from his nose in 2008 and a couple falls that caused him to get bruised or concussed during polo bouts. His head injury was feared by the physicians after he was flung so violently. Charles, however, insisted on completing the game. It turned into a royal brand. Tradition above self, duty over suffering. He would eventually continue to appear in front of cameras despite his doctor's advice to rest because of that same urge. The crown was more than just an inheritance to him. It was a spirit-based duty that had to be upheld at all costs. Then the pandemic struck. The entire country held their breath when it was revealed in 2020 that Charles had tested positive for COVID-19. At the time, he was 71, which is regarded as a high-risk age. However, his illness was minor, and he recovered quickly. Despite being isolated in Scotland, he kept up his distant work, reading daily briefings and making video conversations. The people viewed it as evidence of his tenacity. However, those in his inner circle started to pick up on little shifts. Exhaustion, fewer public appearances, and a growing dependence on aides. Although it wasn't concerning at the time, it did sow the seeds of worry that have since grown. The palace announced in an exceptionally thorough announcement at the beginning of 2024 that the king will receive treatment for an enlarged prostate. A new era of openness was heralded by the transparency. Charles looked happy when he was released from the hospital after the successful treatment. Only a few weeks later, however, the results of the follow-up tests showed something else, something darker. The discovery of a type of cancer was verified by Buckingham Palace in February. Because the precise kind was not revealed, anxiety and conjecture were heightened. The British king was, for the first time, a victim in a battle he could not entirely control. The pattern became recognizable after that. Short stays, cautious optimism, and hospital visits. The palace would define every incident as preventative or standard. But the pressure became apparent as the months went by. His skin turned pale, he lost a little weight, and he became less visible in public. But he stayed unwavering. He still signed papers, gave brief speeches, and met with the Prime Minister once a week. However, many who observed him in the background claimed that he was frequently worn out. Prince William has now confirmed that the condition is incurable, bringing the long-guarded truth to light. William made the announcement during a charity function in London. His look was controlled but brimming with emotion as he stood at the podium. A silence descended upon the audience as cameras flashed. "My father has shown the courage we all know him for in the face of his illness," he remarked. "However, we've come to the realization that some fights are meant to be fought with grace rather than won." There was silence in the room. Simple, human, and devastating, those remarks spread more quickly than any formal news release could. For the first time since Princess Diana's passing, a royal has discussed death so candidly. The public's response was prompt. The palace was inundated with messages. Outside Windsor Castle, candles were lit. Even the monarchy's detractors were sympathetic. Following the death of Queen Elizabeth, Charles served as a bridge between the old and the new for many Britons. His collapse now seemed to mark the end of an era. William's choice to speak up was universally hailed as courageous and kind, but it also had political significance, since it indicated that the shift in power had already started, at least in actuality. Insiders claim that King Charles has been quietly embracing this moment and preparing for it. He is said to have revised private correspondence, recorded personal messages, and spoken with the Archbishop of Canterbury about his desires in recent weeks. He is described by many who have met him as contemplative rather than fearful. He has talked of leaving a legacy, not simply a reign, but a revitalized sense of the institution's mission. Like his forebears, he has written what palisades call his final wishes, but they are moral rather than legal. Such gestures abound in royal history. With a locket of Prince Albert by her heart and her bridal veil, Queen Victoria requested to be buried in white. George V asked the monarchy to maintain its humility and ties to the populace. A young Elizabeth was advised by King George V to maintain composure in the face of adversity. According to legend, Charles, who comes from that family, had 3 hopes: that his sons make amends, that the monarchy keeps evolving, and that Britain never loses sight of the humanity of its throne. It is a royal road plan as well as a personal appeal. Modernization, the first wish, is now a reality. The monarchy has streamlined under Charles, emphasizing transparency and essential responsibilities. The new face of that ministry is William and Catherine. The public's perception of the crown has changed as a result of their friendliness, warmth, and dedication to issues like the environment and mental health. The king's concept of a monarchy that serves rather than governs is viewed as being extended by the Williams Earthshot Prize and Catherine's early childhood project. In particular, Catherine has come to represent the subdued power that formerly characterized Queen Elizabeth. Her poise throughout Charles's illness has been praised. As she raises her 3 children and deals with her own recent health issues, she keeps up her engagements. She is seen by many as the stately yet approachable embodiment of royal womanhood in the future. Charles frequently expresses his pride in her, referring to her as the stable star of the future generation, according to those close to him. Queen Camilla, meanwhile, has assumed more of the king's duties. She has met foreign dignitaries, given receptions, and even served as the chairperson of some ceremonial events. Considering the decades of scrutiny she endured, her poise has been astounding. She has been Charles's rock during therapy, according to insiders, reading to him, praying with him, and making sure he gets enough sleep. She has become an unexpected emblem of perseverance, and her dedication has softened public perception. Then there's Princess Anne, the silent powerhouse of the family. She still fulfills hundreds of engagements annually, living up to the sense of responsibility her mother taught her. According to people at the palace, Anne has taken on the role of William's unofficial advisor, helping him navigate the challenges of taking up his father's responsibilities. She is invaluable in this uncertain time because of her work ethic. One absence, however, is unavoidable despite the royal machine's adaptation. Harry, Prince, the younger son of the monarch, has lived thousands of miles away from the establishment that helped mold him. With a few private phone conversations and one quick visit following the diagnosis, his relationship with his father has only somewhat improved in recent months. The king still yearns for reconciliation, according to palace insiders, who frequently discuss his 2 sons, 2 pathways, and 1 hope. Harry's tale is still heartbreaking and iconic. He left in 2020 with the intention of bringing about peace, but it gave rise to years of debate. His litigation, memoir, and interviews all widened the gulf. However, there are rumors that Harry is once again feeling the pull of duty as his father's health deteriorates. Another insider remarked, "He's torn. Although he realizes his presence could overshadow the event, he still wants to be there." One of the monarchy's most urgent emotional concerns is whether he will return in time. William, on the other hand, has assumed the position of acting monarch in all but name. He attends briefings, chairs state meetings, and manages the daily operations of the crown. Those close to him, however, claim that beneath his composed facade, he is having difficulties. No son envies the dichotomy of seeing his father deteriorate while getting ready to replace him. Being the son of a dying monarch and the Prince of Wales, he is attempting to strike a balance. An assistant was revealed. Few can imagine that weight. Now the country is unsure of what will happen next. Is King Charles able to step down? Is it possible that Britain may witness a live king take the throne before passing away? There is only one contemporary precedent in history. In 1936, Edward VIII abdicated his throne in order to wed Wallis Simpson. However, that was a love decision rather than a health one. Parliament would have to enact new legislation specifically addressing Charles's abdication if he were to resign. Although unlikely, legal experts agree it is feasible. Charles sees his role as a sacred obligation that must be carried out until the day he dies. The Regency Acts, which enable counselors of state like William and Camilla to carry out tasks on behalf of the king, are more likely to be used by the monarchy. Quietly, this arrangement has already started. William represents the crown overseas, attends investitures, and signs certain documents. Maintaining the monarchy's functionality when the king is at rest requires striking a careful balance between continuity and respect. The world observes a father and son negotiating the silent farewell as well as a royal family in transition during the coming days. William is seen on camera leaving the hospital with his eyes obscured by thick glasses and his mouth clenched. Every picture conveys a tale of loss and dignity. The public is also aware of it. The sense that a period is coming to an end and that the monarch who waited 70 years might not hold the throne for very long. The inevitable is still being prepared for inside Buckingham Palace. Updates are made to documents, rituals are described, and logistics are discreetly practiced. However, there is sensitivity even in these pragmatics. Employees talk about Charles's insistence on penning handwritten messages of gratitude and his frequent inquiries about the gardens, the weather, and the outside world. Compassion, a link between the ancient and the modern, between ceremony and sincerity, has characterized his brief but significant rule. The road ahead is both obvious and intimidating for Prince William. He will ascend to the throne sooner than anticipated and take on the duty of mending a family and a country. His words, steady, kind, and determined, already convey that fate. Britain is once again on the brink of transformation. As one royal historian stated, the crown has already begun to rest on his shoulders. We shall never forget the image of King Charles, weak yet dignified, waving from a car window. The ultimate shape of the truth has been supplied by Prince William's voice, which is brave but shaking. The monarchy is mortal, just like its ruler. But its greatest human power, endurance, is found in that mortality. His legacy is already inscribed in service, family, and the unsaid bravery of accepting death with dignity, regardless of how many months or years King Charles continues to rule. The UK appeared to hold its breath in the days that followed. As though anticipation had thickened the air surrounding Buckingham Palace, the pace of national life slowed. At royal homes around the nation, crowds gathered in peaceful clusters. Balmoral, Windsor, and Sandringham. Every location has a connection to the king's lengthy tenure in office. Bouquets lined the pavement outside Clarence House. Some had notes written by hand. "I appreciate your grace. Always for king and country." Under a sky rich with history, the royal guard stood at their posts, stoic as ever. That week, the Prime Minister paid the monarch a private visit, which was seen as brief but meaningful. Only a statement certifying that His Majesty remained abreast of all state activities was made public. No formal details were disclosed. However, rumors discreetly circulated in political circles that the discussion had focused more on legacy and how to maintain stability when the inevitable time came than it had on governance. According to many who knew him, Charles talked quietly yet powerfully. The crown persists. It has always been and always will be. The king was reported to spend his days in his own rooms, surrounded by letters, books, and mellow music. Camilla read aloud passages from scripture or poetry while his cherished pet slept by the window. Visitors spoke of a calmness in him, a calmness that resulted from acceptance rather than denial. "He has reconciled with time," a silent assistant remarked, knowing that the world will continue on. He just hopes it carries on kindly. At Balmoral, where the royal family gathered in the summer of 2025, Prince William arrived with his family for what aides described as a private visit. The children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, were seen playing on the lawns, unaware of the weight that hung over the adults. For William, the visit was bittersweet. He knew it might be one of the last times his children would see their grandfather as they remembered him. Gentle, humorous, and alive with curiosity, Charles had insisted they visit, wanting to show them the gardens one final time. The meeting between father and son that evening lasted nearly 2 hours. There were no cameras, no quarters, just the two men in the quiet of the Scottish dusk. Later, those close to the family said William emerged with tears in his eyes, but a calmness in his voice. He said his father was proud of him, one confidant recalled. He said everything that needed to be said. Meanwhile, Prince Harry's return became the subject of intense speculation. Paparazzi waited at Heathrow, scanning each arriving flight for a glimpse of him. There was nothing for days. Then one evening, a black SUV was spotted driving through the palace gates without any ceremony. The Duke of Sussex had paid his father a secret visit, the palace revealed the next morning. Witnesses reported it as intensely emotional, yet it lasted less than an hour. Whatever was said at the encounter was kept confidential, but according to people close to both brothers, it might have marked the start of the gradual process of reconciliation. The tone in the media changed from conjecture to contemplation. Long retrospectives of Charles's life, his decades as Prince of Wales, his fight for the environment, and his love of the arts were published in newspapers. Videos of him planting trees, visiting flood victims, and making sketches in his notebooks were shown in documentaries. The tale that emerged was one of a man whose lifelong obsessions had finally found their place in history, rather than one of a king losing his significance. He was a pioneer in his field. According to one commentator, he discussed obligation when freedom was valued and climate change before it was trendy. Even though his rule is brief, his influence will linger. That appreciation was reflected in public sentiment. Every night, candlelight vigils were held outside Buckingham Palace. Hymns were sung by choirs. Union Jacks flew at half-mast because of instinct rather than command. The dignity of it all captivated even those who opposed the monarchy. The silent bravery of a monarch facing death without display. For a moment, empathy, rather than politics or pageantry, brought Britain back together. Behind the scenes, transition preparations were more intense within the palace. For what insiders tactfully called Operation Manibridge, official documents were examined, speeches were written, and logistics were practiced. The king's impending demise was codenamed. Charles's closest friends and family, however, maintained that there was still hope and some bright spots. He chuckles. He remembers. The Archbishop of Canterbury came often to provide prayers and company, and one staff member remarked, "He tells stories about his childhood, about the gardens, about his mother. There's a sense of continuity. Even in decline, he reminds us of where we've come from." He once conducted a tiny private service that was only attended by Charles, Anne, William, and Camilla. Their voice almost cut through the murmur of the wind outside as they sang gently. Charles reportedly made a confession and a benediction when he remarked, "If my reign ends tomorrow, I'll leave knowing we did our best for this country." Subtle tributes started to appear in Parliament. All parties' MPs praised the king's commitment, his lifetime of service, and his sense of humor. One remembered a private gathering where Charles enthusiastically talked about both architecture and agriculture. According to the MP, he was very concerned with the little things in life, like the soil beneath the large symbols. Perhaps more than his titles, his humanity was what made him popular with the populace. When autumn came, the palace published what would probably be the last official image of King Charles III, showing him sitting in his study with a slight grin on his lips and sunlight pouring in through the window. A framed photo of Queen Elizabeth II and another of his boys as kids was on his desk. The image of a man between generations, between duty and eternity, was straightforward, unadorned, yet powerful. It quickly gained notoriety and was featured in headlines on top pages the following morning. The world became quieter in the weeks that followed. Palace remarks became few and public appearances were halted. Word then got out that family members had been called to Windsor when the royal gates closed earlier than normal one evening. That evening, no announcement was given. However, the Prime Minister appeared in a dark suit as he left Downing Street the following morning. She whispered that His Majesty the King is still at ease and with his family. The message behind the lines was clear to the country. Church bells rang out across the nation, not in grief, but in prayer. Whispering words of hope, people stopped in stores, on buses, and in offices. Between the last hours of a king and the unavoidable dawn of a son, the time seemed to hover between two eras. Once more, the monarchy stood on the precipice of history, its pulse pulsing in rhythm with the country it had long served. And somewhere in the silent corridors of Windsor, a father gave his son one final glance, as a man to the boy who would inherit not just his crown, but also his burdens, his dreams, and his love for the place they both called home, rather than as a monarch to his heir. It was the most humane of farewells in every way.